I'm honored to be here and join this wonderful gathering. As a white guy, it's also yeah, no kidding, right? Did you? And did I mention Obama was black?
Not yet.
Not yet, right? It's just wonderful to be introduced to these traditions too. So thank you. On the race, look. This is clearly historic. I think it has already done wonders around the world for this country. In my travels and the travels, I'm sure, of many people on this panel, if you go you go to Europe, you go to Canada, you go to Asia, people are all exclaiming about two things. One, how open this system has been, and how, for they say, in Toronto, people told me recently, for 6 or 7 years, we've been very disappointed in the United States. We've seen a lot of the bad side of the United States. This is the first time in a long time we've seen the good side of the United States, and we admire how open it is. They're very excited that when it came right down to the end, both a woman and an African American were there in the finals for the Democratic nomination. And they're equally excited, and we saw this in Germany. The excitement surrounding the Obama campaign overseas is enormous. I've never seen anything like it in American politics. I think it has already done a great deal to help restore some of the lost reputation of this country. But people are also going to be hanging on the election results, and we're going to have to, that could go either way. And let me just say this, Barack Obama is the most remarkable candidate I've seen. There are only two in the past 40 years, I think, compare as a candidate in terms of the way they excite people and what could make a major difference in his governing. And one was John Kennedy and the other was Ronald Reagan, and they excited people of different persuasions, but they each had the capacity to mobilize the country, and that, if he's elected, will be one of his most important political assets, because Washington is broken, and the way to solve that is to have public pressure coming in from the hinterlands on people in Washington to do the right thing. And that's why it's not just this election, but if he's elected, it's going to be the years he's in office that your participation, your support, your citizenship is going to make a major, major difference. But let me just say this, where we are right now. The landscape clearly favors a Democratic victory. By normal standards, the Democrats ought to win the presidency and the House and the Senate by comfortable margins, and the presidency by 8 to 12 points. And Barack Obama is now favored. I think he's probably going to win, but I think we have learned in recent days that this candidacy is more vulnerable than appeared 3 or 4 weeks ago. He was on a roller coaster last week in the polls. He had that European trip, we've never seen a foreign trip by a candidate that was as well executed and as well received as that trip was. And yet we don't see much of a bounce. So I have to tell you that there are other things that work in this election below the surface, and one of them is race. And we don't know how big it is. We can't measure it. One senior Republican strategist, he wanted to be unnamed, told me 3 or 4 weeks ago he thought it was going to make a 4 to 6 point difference in the campaign. That would say a very close campaign. Peter Hart was quoted in the Wall Street Journal. He's a major pollster who has done serious work in this area for a long, long time. And he said as many as 10% of the people who are participating in polls right now are not telling pollsters the truth about their intentions and about where they are. So I would just tell you that I think that Obama is favored to win, but I think it could be a very close race, and I think John McCain could win this. And there is a tension among some people here still about whether sexism did in Hillary Clinton. Has there been some issue here about white women versus black women, about whites versus blacks, on how this is playing out? If people let those stand in the way, if that's what they talk about here for the next few weeks, about those differences and those tensions, we can talk about them in this panel, but if they become sort of the absorbing question for a lot of people and how they vote, the chances will skyrocket that Barack Obama will lose. It does seem to me that those are legitimate questions. The Hillary Clinton people have legitimate questions about how she was treated by the press, how she was, whether the Obama campaign somehow enabled it, I don't think so, but I think it's a legitimate question. I think those are all legitimate questions. But I must tell you, if you're a Democrat and you have any interest in the future of the Democrats winning, those questions ought to be discussed after the campaign, not over the next 10 weeks.
Thank you, Doug. What you're seeing, hearing, and watching.
Well, I'd like to pick up on what Roland just said in terms of the question of change, because I do think that the most important word in this election is change. And what you said is, are we prepared to change our understanding of leadership to transfer it to the next generation? Are we prepared to change our views of who is entitled or prepared to be a leader? Are we prepared to think about having someone who comes not just from the Black tradition, but from the immigrant tradition, leading this country? And here, I have to say, David, I'm a little worried about your recommendation that we not address some of these questions until after the election. Because if we wait until after the election, as Rosabeth just whispered, it will be too late. And the reason I think it will be too late is because this is an opportunity for us not only to change who is leading the country from the top, but the kind of conversation that we're having about leadership at the bottom. And I see this kind of panel, I see the conversations that David is talking about, that Roland is talking about, that the Bay State Banner has been helping to spearhead as an integral part of the question of change. Because part of what is at stake is not just changing who is leading, but changing what we talk about when we are trying to understand the challenges facing this country in the 21st century. And it's up to us as we the people, and here I absolutely agree with David, to mobilize, to push the media to play a more honest role in providing us with information that is relevant, with information that is timely, and with information that actually will educate us to the kinds of challenges that are at stake in this election. If we allow the media to define this election, even if Barack Obama wins, we lose.
Thank you. Professor Rosabeth Cantor, hold up that book you've written on leadership, and the question leadership has come up, and tell us your sense about what that means from all your work and what it means in this election.
Hold up the book.
Well, thank you, Lonnie. America the Principle. But I want to pick up on some of what...
Sell your book, child.
Yes.
Thanks, Charles. And I just want to say, as I turn the microphone over to Reverend Sharpton, in addition to all the other things you know about, he is leading one of the most important reform efforts for public education today with Joel Klein. We thank you for what you're doing with that. If I might just add a couple of things to what had been said about the Hillary Clinton, Barack Obama, white woman versus black candidate question. Listen, you should know where I'm coming from. 3 months ago, 4 or 5 months ago, I was totally opposed and thought it was a terrible idea to have a ticket with Barack Obama and Hillary Clinton as vice president. And I have come around the other way now to believe that given the circumstances, given the vulnerability of the Obama campaign, the Obama candidacy that has been shown recently, that I think that it is a mistake for the Obama campaign to take her off the short list. I think she ought to be right at the top of the short list. And I say that realizing there are all sorts of problems and questions and baggage and bill and all the rest of it.
Baggage and bill.
Well,
It's alliterative.
you know what I'm withholding here. So but having said all that, I think a couple of things are necessary. I think important. One is, given the rawness of these feelings, and they're very legitimate and understandable that Lonnie and Rosabeth have both given a voice to, it does seem to me that the first thing our political party needs to do is unite coming out of a convention. That is a given in American politics. And frequently, a candidate may ask somebody he doesn't particularly like. John Kennedy didn't really like Lyndon Johnson, and Bobby detested Lyndon Johnson. But they asked him to come on the ticket because it united the party, and they won the election as a result. And it does seem to me that, that's Proposition 1. And Proposition 2 is, Hillary predicted a long time ago the Republican campaign machine would crank up against Obama. And now Barack Obama's out there by himself frequently as taking the brunt of these attacks. I think he needs a strong fighter by his side. And Hillary Clinton proved to be a very strong, effective fighter in her campaign. She deserved credit for that. So that's why I think that one answer to this is the Hillary Clinton question. But let's say he does not go that way. Let's say for a variety of reasons he may decide, as he's entitled to go another direction. The issues that you're raising about women are very legitimate. But if the next 95 days are spent in the conversation about the past, you're going to lose the future. So that's the issue to me. And that's the only argument I wanted to make.
Let me ask you one quick question before you leave, David, in terms of the Republican strategy, the Karl Rove strategy, if there were one, and that is, if there is a debate, whether it's real or imagined, about the gender, race, religion issue, could a Republican Party turn that into an advantage and move that difference of 6 or 8, 10 points by saying they're fighting, this is 68 again, Democrats in Chicago, 1968. Say just a word about how you can see a Republican victory, because the Democratic Party in other occasions with the popular vote still didn't bring the troops out in a unified way.
The Chicago Convention in 1968 that Charles is referring to was a turning point in American politics. Prior to that convention, the Democrats had won 7 out of 10 presidential elections. They appeared in that convention split, fractured, fractious, and since the Chicago Convention of 1968, the Democrats have lost 7 out of 10 elections. So it's important, it seems to me, for the Democratic Party to come with a united front. But I also think that given this attack machine, John McCain has said, and I think he's right, he's been very careful not to raise the race issue directly. His campaign has been very careful about that. But we all know what's going on here. You don't have to call attention to the racial issue. You don't have to hang any lantern on that. Everybody knows the African-American candidate standing on the Democratic side. What you have to do is create a narrative about that candidate that's different from the narrative that a lot of people hold in their heads now. And the narrative that you want to hear from the Democrats is, a man came out of a broken home. He's deserted by his father. His mother worked like crazy to help him get up in life through talent, through hard work, through enormous diligence. He was able to break through, and all the rest. And that's an inspiring story. A community organizer went out. He could turn down. You could have made $1 zillion on Wall Street. He turned it down to work back home in his community and really help people. That's an inspiring story. That's not the narrative that the other side is trying to create. It's a very different narrative. And they don't have to mention race. It can be built on the other side. So this is going to be a tough campaign. Race is not going to be as discussed as Roland said. I think Roland's been right at the forefront of discussing race in his country as a journalist right from the beginning. He's been having this conversation every day and in the evenings. But most people don't want to talk about it. But you don't have to talk about it if you can hang other things around it and suddenly create. And that's what I think part of the issue is, and why it seems to me that Barack Obama needs a fighter by his side, somebody who can say some of the things he can't say, and he needs to unite the party. That's my own 2 cents.
David Gergen, thank you for being with us today. Thank you very much. Reverend Sharpton, you have a child of the civil rights movement, having worked with Reverend Jackson for many, many decades, having followed in his footsteps by continuing that effort. Everything from the Gina Six to Sean Bell, just every important effort, and a candidate for president just 4 years ago. And you have been, since day one, said, I'm not announcing my support for this or that candidate. I want to see where they stand on the issues. Where do you feel we are today in terms of race, gender, age, and religion, and how that has infected or affected the campaign?
Well, I mean, several months ago I said I'm supporting Obama. I did not make an endorsement earlier. I wanted to stand on issues. I think that Senator Obama clearly is on the right side of the issues, has championed them, and would be the only alternative for this country going forward is to elect him president. I think that having said that, I'm listening to the panelists that have spoken. I would say, one, the media, in my opinion, has oversimplified a lot of these discussions. When we talk about Hillary Clinton and gender, I would agree that a lot of women rightfully feel in some ways she was treated unfairly. I think that there is some legitimate concerns of gender bias and sexism. I think it becomes even more of a problem with black women who have to deal with race and sex, and that's a different part of that feeling. But I think that we cannot just simplify that discussion with Hillary Clinton without keeping in mind that Hillary Clinton was not allowed to run just as a woman. She ran as a woman and Bill Clinton's wife. So compounded with the suggestion of working with Hillary is not just as easy as saying Hillary and Barack. You're talking about Barack, Hillary, and Bill. And I think to act like that is not the case, is not to have a fair hearing on what these issues are. I think that there is a significant portion of the electorate, many of us who supported Obama, that have a lot more problem with the behavior of Mr. Clinton than Mrs. Clinton being a woman. So I think that, and I might say some of my friends are responsible for that, because I think some of them went around so long calling him the first black president, he believed it and thought he could talk to us any kind of way he wanted to talk to us. So we got to take some of the blame for that. Having said that, I think that it is important that the party unite. I think it is important, I agree with her, that we deal with the reality, whether we think it's justified or not, that there needs to be a healing and the bringing in of a lot of the elements in the white women's community. I think that that is real. I think that that is needed. I think it is politically immature to ignore it. And I mean, I wouldn't say how to do it, nor am I trying to create a headline, Sharpton comes to Martha's Vineyard to date white women. That's not what I'm trying to do. So erase that.
I just saw somebody writing that down.
But I do agree with you. What'd you say, call me Al? Is that what you said? I'm riding the ferry back at 8:30. I also think there's been an oversimplification on the race issue. One of the things, and I think Dr. Guinier really touched on it, and Roland, I think one of the things that has been oversimplified for many white Americans is this monolithic picture of the black community. The problem that I see is not just generational, is they see every generation as one monolith. There has always been different blacks playing different roles in every generation. The fact of the matter is, in the 60s, that is so romanticized, we had Martin Luther King in the South, Malcolm X in the North, Adam Clayton Powell in Congress, Thurgood Marshall in the Supreme Court, Fannie Lou Hamer in Mississippi, all at the same time, same generation. I mean, we've never had a situation where we only had one expression per generation. I'll give you an example. Right now, when I talk about this oversimplification, and Ted and I was talking about it earlier today, when you talk about the post-racial generation. Well, what generation is that? What age is that? Because, and they say, well, you're talking about Oprah and David Patterson, who's now governor of New York, and Deval Patrick and Barack. Well, Oprah and David Patterson's older than me. I mean, literally. And Barack is just 6 years younger than me, so unless we're gonna have generations every 3 years now, what are we talking about? People in this post-racial generation marched in Gina in numbers we'd not seen in a long time. People in this post-racial generation marched around the Justice Department in numbers bigger than Gina. People in this generation marched for Sean Bell, 50,000 on Fifth Avenue. We've always had the capacity to have people that were broader than just race issues like Barack and still deal with civil and race issues in the same generation. So I think that there's almost this cynical thing of if we can miscast Barack, we can then in affirmative action, in racial justice, misusing him rather than saying, no, he does not come out of a activist lineage, nor does he claim to be like Dr. King or civil rights leaders in the 60s all the way to now. He comes out of a particular leadership we've always understood, like Ed Brooke, like Doug Wilder, like now Deval. There's always, when I became a teenager, we had black mayors of cities like Tom Bradley. When I was a teen, we saw Carl Stokes, we saw Richard, we have seen an evolution of blacks achieving power, first at a citywide level, a lot of black mayors in the 70s, to black governors with Doug Wilder, now to a black president. What they're trying to do is compare different lanes that don't fit in our community. Barack Obama comes out of a direct lineage of blacks that have always been able to appeal to mainstream that now has gone national. He's being compared to those of us in civil rights that are not those kinds of black leaders. We are there to create and open the door so they can perform and do what they do. There's no conflict. There's no conflict. In fact, it complements each other because you need one to keep the other and the other to institutionalize and legislate what they're doing. Gina just happened last September. So, for example, the reason why I say it is trivialized and in my mind too simplified, Nancy Pelosi is the Speaker of the House. No one suggested that we close National Organization of Women because women now have a speaker. No one would have suggested if Hillary won, we don't need feminist organization. So to insult the blacks that if we're going to have a black president, we shouldn't be concerned about the racial disparity in health care or education or the criminal justice system. That's insulting. And it's also unfair to Barack. Barack Obama is running for president. He is not running to be leader of blacks. And I think that it is an insult to him and us. Last point. I think that it is also important that we understand that it is in everyone's interest to unite around Obama. Let us look at the fact that, yes, the reason, going back to Dr. Guinier's point, which I thought was very good, reason why everybody wants change is look at where we are. You know, we act like this is some great marketing plan that the Obama people had where they just said, change, that'll sell. What sold it was $4 a gallon of gas. What sold it was there were no weapons of mass destruction. What sold it is that America has gone to the dumps, and anybody with any level of intelligence would want to change their own circumstance.
I think they heard you, Reverend. All right. Sister President, Dr. Janetta Cole, woman, African-American, leader,